Hello and welcome to my channel. For those of you who are not familiar, I am AJ. I am a science writer and aspiring fantasy author. Today I actually want to take a moment to share some tips and tricks that help me stay creative for my novel while balancing the responsibilities of a full-time job. So today's video is really focusing on all of you writers out there who are working, studying, or both full-time while trying to write and or publish your novel, which I know can be really rough. As many of you have experienced, it can be really hard to maintain a creative output and really maintain a routine to put towards your writing when you are balancing 40 hours or more a week doing non-creative writing duties. This means when you're dealing with coworkers, deadlines, meetings that should have been an email, a lot of this can really zap some of that creative energy out and make it feel like you're not getting any progress into that novel of yours. So today I really just want to share with you some of the tips and the tricks that I've found work for me in helping me maintain, even at a low level, some sort of creative output. So I feel like I'm still working towards that goal, but it is not so crazy that I'm going to experience a burnout anytime soon and then end up kind of freezing on the project until eventually I have time to pick it up again. As a disclaimer, this is not a secret of the craft. This is not a, one size fits all. This is just a list of the things that have helped me personally, especially as a beginner trying to balance the full-time job and write a novel. And I really hope that I can impart some sort of help or advice to you guys who are struggling with the same things. So without further ado, let's go and start talking about some of these tricks and tips. Tip number 1, set small goals for yourself. I know this might sound pretty intuitive, but I just want to encourage you to set goals that are easy to maintain in the short term when life throws lemonade all over you, when you just are having a rough day, you need some time for yourself, you need to care for yourself. This is time that you can't anticipate, but you can modify your goals such that when things do come up, you can still have a level of success when you reach these goals. And for example, the small goal that I keep for myself, that is really what I'm trying to keep non-negotiable, is to write 500 words in a week. And I know this is a pretty slow pace to be writing a book with, but I want to reiterate that this is a baseline that I try to achieve every week, that if I achieve it, I can feel successful, I have at least made some progress, and everything beyond that can be a stretch goal or an aspiration. Or what I like to do is I can goal stack, which is what I have my non-negotiable goal, which is that 500 words in a week, something that I try not to change unless there's an absolute emergency. And then the goal on top of that, which can sometimes waver, is to really get 2,000 words a week. So I have a pretty good week. Things aren't too crazy. I can try to reach that stretch goal for 2,000 a week, but if not, and if things do get crazy, then I have that 500, which is really easy for me to maintain. So small goals, short time frame, and play around with it. If you're just starting out, you're gonna have to adjust. You're gonna have to see what works for your life for the most part. I found what works for me, so I encourage you to find what works for you and to keep it simple. You can participate in the lofty goals, you can participate in NaNoWriMo, you can really try to do as much as you can, but again, I recommend to set a small, non-negotiable goal. Tip number 2, reverse your tactics. For all of you plotters out there, try to find maybe once a month a time where you can pants. For all of you pantsers out there, try to plot. Try to stretch that creative muscle into thinking in ways that you don't typically think, that can almost force you to be more mindful of the story at hand. As someone who tends to plot, I can get stuck in the muck of my bullet points, and then I feel like I'm not actually making progress because there are no scenes, there are no chapters that are being written. It's just a bunch of ideas that are written down in sequential order and look a lot more like my to-do lists at work than they do an actual novel. And for you pantsers, try to plot a little bit. Try to plan out what's happening so that you don't end up spending so much time on a bunch of scenes and words that don't necessarily make it all the way in, or kind of take the story into a direction you didn't actually plan on taking it. So stretch that creative muscle, be mindful with your story. And again, it doesn't have to be for a huge amount of time. Even if it's just once a month, try to reverse your tactics, try to see what it's like, and force yourself to think in a different way. Tip number 3 is a very personal one and might not be for everyone. My tip number 3 is to write. I don't mean type, I mean write. I mean, get your pen and get a notebook that forces you to physically write your novel back to the basics. I find that, like tip number 2, it forces you to think in a different way than a lot of us tend to think nowadays. You can write a lot of words when you type. It is, I would say, the predominant mode of writing for a lot of people, but there's something almost magical about writing on a piece of paper with a pen, with a pencil. I think this can also be used, and it personally helps me if I'm experiencing some writer's block, is even if it's not in my novel specifically, just to write something, not type something, write something. Again, this might not work for everyone, and this is a very personal tip because as someone who writes for a living, it can feel like you're almost doing the same thing when you transfer to your creative process and you type your story. So even having that physical break and an actual break from the patterns that you use to work can really help. And this kind of brings me to tip number 4. So my tip number 4 is probably very intuitive as well, and that is to take a break in between your full-time job and your writing. And if you're a morning person, write before you work and write before you think of work. But I think the most important part is to make sure you have an amount of time to effectively reset your mind, because what you have to do for work and what you have to think about for work is probably, and again, this is not if your job is being a creative writer, but it's not the same as creative writing and working on your novel. And I find that when you try to do one right after the other, it can almost cause a sort of like short circuit in your brain and increase your risk of burnout. So if you can only work at night, come home, do everything that you need to after your shift to get ready. Take time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, doesn't matter. Just take some time before you start the process so that you have a little bit of a freshness when you get into it and it feels like there's a separation. I think that separation is very, very important when you're working a full-time job or when you're studying, or both, when you're just doing not novel writing, to have that separation when you then transfer. If you have a spark of inspiration, if something comes to you and you really want to write it down, that's fine. That is not what I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about if you haven't had that and you want to find a routine, make that break part of the routine. A lot of you might already do that, It was something I learned the hard way, and it's something that I continue to use because I find it very, very helpful. Tip number 5, which might not even sound like a tip, is to change or modify what's not working. If you have a pattern and a routine set up and you're not meeting the progress that you want to meet, find a way to change your habits, change your goals, change a little bit of something or modify it to work within the outline of your life. You know, try writing like Brandon Sanderson. Try utilizing other people's patterns and what they do to be successful in their writing endeavors. But if it doesn't work, drop it. You don't have to finish the challenge. You don't have to finish a week of writing like so-and-so if it's not working for you. If you want to, that's fine. But be lenient with yourself. And when you are finding the routine that works best for you, make sure it is you who it works best for. Personalize your routine and be okay if it changes. And I'm sorry if this took too long and if it was too long-winded. I hope that someone got something out of this. If you agree or if you disagree, please leave a comment down below. I am open to discussing these and chatting more about it. If you enjoyed this video, I would immensely appreciate a like or a subscribe, and I really hope to see you around. And I also hope to read the novels that you're writing once you've published them, whenever you publish them. It's a process. It's not a sprint. Writing sprints excluded. All right, happy writing.